Yes.
Mr. Sidwell,
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson,
Yes.
and
Here.
Mr. Primrose,
Here.
and Mr. Sandoval is
Make a motion that we approve the agenda. Second.
Got a motion and a second, roll call please.
Mr. Box?
Yes.
Mr. Sidwell?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval? Absent. And Mr. Primrose?
Yes. Next, I'll turn it over to Dr. Moss, and he can introduce the project.
Well, good afternoon. I want to say first, real quickly, that this is kind of like the official end to one of those things that we have had to go through the last couple of years. And I can't express this enough. So thankful to the board, staff, and faculty that have stayed through this whole period. And the work that many individuals have put in, not only on the special audit, but the 22, the 23, the 24 audit, HLC, and all those other things that we went through to get to this point. This is one more completion that we've reached as a college. So I want to say also thankful to also State Auditor, HED, the legislature, and so many other people that instead of burying us, if that's the correct word, reached out and supported us to help us get back on track. And I think we are back on track. We still have a lot of growing to do, but we're getting there. We're still making progress, and the future, I feel like, looks really bright. So thank you all for coming. We're grateful to have some staff and faculty here, some members of the city of Tucumcari, because this is not just for the college but for the community. So with that said, I would like to introduce Mr. Joseph Maestas, currently the state auditor of New Mexico, and I will let him take it from there.
Thank you, President Moss. It's a pleasure to be here, and the way I characterize this situation is this is perhaps the end of the recovery phase, and we're turning the page into a new renewal phase here at Mesa Lands Community College. Before I make a few remarks about the presentation you're about to receive regarding the outcome of the special audit, I want to just say a few things about what my office does. What we do is we audit every single public entity across the state. We're talking about almost 1,200 entities. About half are entities that have revenue levels that require a full financial audit. The remainder are small local public bodies that are subject to a lesser degree of financial certifications. Why is that important? Because if any public entity in the state of New Mexico cannot maintain financial compliance, you all know that if you have awarded capital outlay, for example, you can't access it if you're not financially compliant. If you're not financially compliant, you can't apply for new sources of revenue. And there's a whole host of other consequences, like bond ratings, that municipalities care about. So maintaining financial compliance is critical here in the state of New Mexico. What else do? We handle anonymous intake of fraud, waste, and abuse complaints. We have a team of certified fraud examiners that if they have enough information, they take the case and investigate it as a fraud examiner. And what happens oftentimes is we make a referral. Depending on the case itself, we may make a referral to law enforcement. We may make a referral to the prosecutorial authority in that area, typically the district attorney. In some instances, if we find violations of the Governmental Conduct Act, we'll make a referral to the State Ethics Commission. So we carry a pretty heavy load, right? I like to say that we're small but mighty. But I want to make sure that folks understand some of the basic functions of the Office of the State Auditor. It is a constitutional office. It's independent. It's not under the governor's authority. It's one of 7 agencies in the executive branch. And so now you know in general what we do. Now let's talk about today in this public presentation of a very important special audit. Back in 2023, it was very apparent that the previous leadership, and I want to emphasize, the previous leadership really led this institution to near insolvency. And it was so alarming that it warranted the intervention of the Higher Education Department, the state legislature, and my office. And so this is the product of a very unique collaboration. I wouldn't say that this is a typical special audit situation, but in the case of Mesalands, this is quite different and unique. Where special appropriations were made available by the legislature, where higher ed asked my office to do this special audit within a month and a half of higher education department's letter requesting that I conduct a special audit, I designated Mesalands Community College for a special audit. And so that was back in 2023, and the college was far behind on reconciling financial transactions up to a year and a half. And you're about to hear some of the more detailed findings, but they range anywhere from conflicts of interest to procurement violations to a lack of fiduciary training to the decision makers, and so I'm not gonna go into any great detail, but it's it's akin to peeling back the onion. And unfortunately, like this new leadership that has the right vision and the right tone at the top to really shepherd in some adequate internal controls and ensure that everyone adheres to those internal controls and procedures. And so governance and leadership and tone at the top is so important, especially in circumstances like this. And I think you're going to see at the end of this presentation that this new leadership team has a lot to do just yet. But I think today represents kind of the turning of the page in the history of Mesalands Community College. And it's the beginning of a new and exciting chapter, because trust me, in all my conversations that I've had with appropriators and others, they understand the unique role that Mesalands Community College plays here in this region. We rely on Mesalands for workforce development, for molding and educating our future leaders in hard-to-fill sectors of the economy. And so I think we all understand that, but I can tell you back in 2023, one particular legislator was trying to basically shop Mesalands to other higher learning institutions for a takeover. And that's how bad it became. We're talking formal letters. And so we have come a long way in a short period of time. And so as state auditor, as your financial watchdog, to safeguard taxpayer money from fraud, waste, and abuse, I am very encouraged and very pleased. I know that you're going to have long faces when we go through the detailed presentation of the findings, but if you look at the big picture, this is a time to look forward with hope, with vision and encouragement. And I have all the confidence in the world in Dr. Moss's team and the governing body and the foundation. Let's not forget, the foundation is a component unit of the college. And I also want to state that when we were asked to step in, we could have facilitated the hiring of an independent public accounting firm. Instead of doing that, we stepped up and we said, we'll do it with in-house staff from the Office of the State Auditor. And so our financial audit division director, Ms. Donna Montoya, she stepped up and made, trust me, repeated trips here. And we have conducted, I believe, the last 3 annual financial audits. One of those was disclaimed. So Mesa Lands went, and that is the worst type of audit. Mesa Lands went from disclaimed to unmodified. Unmodified is much better than disclaimed. So even during the course of the annual financial audits, which this institution was way behind on, it's made incredible progress. And so much so that I believe that federal funding is secure. I hear that enrollment is up. So look, I'm a former mayor. I was former mayor of Espanola, and I understand the role of institutions like this can play as an economic anchor for not just the community itself, but for the region. So Mesa Lands Community College is going to live on and flourish, but we have some work to do. And so folks, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words, Dr. Moss and the governing body. And I'll turn it over to our Special Investigations Division Director, Mr. Sean Beck. He'll be going through the actual special audit and focus on the general areas and the findings themselves. And they'll be displayed on the screen so you can follow along. So with that, Sean, come on up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Auditor. Set up here. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all being here today. My name is Sean Beck, as Auditor Maestas mentioned, the Special Investigations Director of the Office of the State Auditor. And today I'm going to be going through this special audit report and the findings, and we'll be entertaining any questions that might come up during the presentation. The report itself is very detailed. It has a total of 12 findings, which are also very detailed. So I'm not going to go into the weeds and bore you guys to death with a lot of numbers and facts that may put you to sleep. I'm going to try to keep it at a higher level, so I don't keep you here all night. But I don't want to skim over anything that is important for the college and everybody else moving forward. So as the auditor described, the special audit was designated by the Office of the State Auditor in 2023. And he tasked my division to work with independent public accounting firm, Carmelo Accounting Group, which was the firm that was contracted to perform this special audit as a joint engagement between the Office of the State Auditor and a private accounting. Initially, we were hoping to complete this special audit back in the 2023 timeframe. But as Auditor Maestas noted, the college at that time was behind by a number of years on its annual financial audits. And given the severity of the financial crisis that the college found itself in at the time, it was determined that the important part was to find out exactly how bad the college's financial situation was first, and that's where the financial audits came in. Can't really hear you, but
That's my mic.
Oh, that is,
not the
okay,
other one.
sorry. Just kind of maybe if you could put it up here.
sure try.
Oops. They have to turn on that thing. Just project.
Will this work better? Can you hear me better now? If I stand over here, over the microphone? I'm sorry. I was just trying to make room for the notebook as we go follow along. But as I was saying, we needed to find out what the financial situation was first. So the priority was those annual audit reports. So our office completed the fiscal year 22 audit and the fiscal year 2023 audits for the college before we began the special audit. And then once we began the special audit, we were able to complete it in a fairly timely fashion because the college was able to get us the documentation we needed quickly. It did take the time to get started, but once we got started, we were able to complete it quickly. here at the college during the time that we looked at the period, as well as a different board makeup for both the foundation and for the college. So a lot of this lies on your predecessors and actions they did or did not take. And what this report is intended to point out for those in management and leadership positions is the responsibilities that you have as elected officials overseeing public institutions such as the college, as well as management responsibilities and what happens if those responsibilities are not followed through with. And that's the result of a number of these findings. So when we talk about that, there was a lot of good intention in prior management, but how it was implemented is what put the college in the situation it found itself in. It's very important for us to understand what that was, so the corrective actions that the management, that the leadership of the college has stated they're taking in correcting these findings can move forward, and the college can emerge much stronger. So if you go ahead and just go ahead and flip to the next page, please. So this report is available to the public online through the state auditor's website. I don't have that website written down, but I can provide it to anybody who would like it. But this report is available to anybody who wants it. So the period we looked at was based on the concerns was from July 2018 through April 30th, 2023. That's the period, that's the time frame we call the period. So it's fiscal year 2018 through the vast majority of fiscal year 2023. It's important to capture the date of April 30th because that was right after the higher education department placed the college under its heightened fiscal accountability. And a lot of these issues had already been brought out to the public's attention. The special audit had been designated, and there was a lot of changes that were being put into place here at the college. So we wanted to look at the things that happened before that led up to the situation that came about in late 2022 into early 2023. So that was the time period we looked at. So going through, next page please. We found in our review of the situation here at the college that there was one of the greatest impacts was the turnover of staff and the loss of critical members of the financial team. There was a CFO that had been here for a very long time who left and went on to other endeavors, and there was a large hole in capability left here at the college. So that hole was very difficult for the college to fill. During that same time, there was a new president that was brought in, who came in with, as we found through our examination, not a lot of experience when it came to running public institutions of higher education and working with public dollars and public budgets, as well as staff that was not properly trained in utilizing their financial reporting systems or having the skills, knowledge, and experience to perform the financial accountability necessary for running the college. That included not being able to keep up with collecting federal funds that were due to the college. And it also included not reconciling their cash balances and other accounts timely and accurately. What does that mean? It meant that during this period that we were looking at, that the leadership of the college did not know and could not know what the final financial situation of the college was. decision makers, either at the president's level or at the board level, was inaccurate, and those decisions were not based on accurate numbers. There was a time, and we'll talk about this as one of the findings, is as many of the staff know, there was pay increases that were provided by former president to staff. The former president came in with the intention of improving Mesa Lands based on everything the information we could glean, and take it to the next level. And doing so by increasing staff recruitment and staff compensation. Unfortunately, the figures that the president was basing those decisions on were not accurate. So his information was not accurate. Coupled with that was during a time period when the state legislature also deemed staff increases for compensation were to be made. Some of those compensations were not fully funded by the legislature, so the college had to come up with the funding out of their existing budget. Those additional raises were not factored into the college's budget. The president at the time was not aware that that was going to happen, and it caught the college in a pretty tight predicament when you include the fact that it was not recovering the funds that it should have been recovering from some of the payables that were due. So if you go through, we're going to be talking about the findings more in depth, but this was a special audit that was conducted utilizing what we call forensic accounting procedures. This is a very in-depth review of transactions, almost on a transaction by transaction level. It's very in-depth. It's used for investigations and for potential litigation purposes. It's very in-depth. So we looked at a lot of information. We looked at a lot of numbers, a lot of transactions, and really dug through the numbers and the documentation. And we conducted several dozen interviews of current and former staff members, leadership, board members, etc., to get an understanding of what the situation was here at the college. So going through, next page please. Going to the next one. So we went through a series of issues and areas of risk that were tested. We tested leases between the college and foundation, and we looked at those transactions, and from the testing purposes, from the audit perspective, we had a difficult time aligning the purposes of those leases with the needs of the college. So that's an area of risk that we looked at, whether or not those funds are being expended appropriately or in the best interest of the college. And that's where those issues were derived from. We then went on the next page, please. We then looked at federal grants and endowment funds. The foundation holds all the endowment funds for the college, for the benefit of the college. We looked to ensure that those were being governed. We've been provided information that there was concerns amongst the college community that those funds were not being safeguarded and used appropriately. We did not find that to be the case, but we did look at that, and that's where we identified federal drawdown issues on the federal funds, not being drawn down timely, and the college getting reimbursed. So they're actually putting themselves into a hole. Next page, please. So I want to have you focus real quick on that very top paragraph. The delayed cash draws of fiscal years 2022 and 2023 cash draws worsened the college's financial position during the peak of its crisis. This all came to a head. It was a combination of all these factors that in November of 2022 emergency action by the state legislature, state board of finance, and getting resources to the college to keep you going. I will explain here that in looking through all this, in combination of the annual financial audits that were done by the Office of the State Auditor, as well as what we found in the special audit, that the college's financial situation in 2023 was not nearly as bad as they feared. Many of you may know the legislature appropriated roughly $2 million to help the college remain afloat and make it through the end of fiscal year 2023, which will be June 2023. The college used a small fraction of that amount. Why did they request so much or get awarded so much and only need so little? Goes back to the earlier point I made, is that the college at that point in time, their financial records were in such disarray they did not know what their situation was. You guys have made, college has made great progress, and we'll talk about some of the things that the college has done. But that put the situation, that financial situation, really made it much worse than it was, because the then president, the then board did not know what their financial situation was, and it appeared to be much worse than it actually was. That's a good thing, that you weren't nearly as bad off as feared. But the fact of the matter is that you didn't have that information. So next page, please. So we looked at monetary and in-kind contributions. There were no indications of any type of misstatements or anything issues there. There were a couple of in-kind contributions. The Armory building was caught on fire during that period of time, as well as the parking lot. Move on to the next page, please. The staff recruitment, hiring, and salary increases. That was a big area that really impacted the college's day-to-day operations when it came to funds. The prior president came in, as I stated, and put into place a plan that was approved, did receive board approval, and to move forward to increase compensation, for existing college staff and to increase recruitment to fill vacant positions. That included looking at a classification study that was done by the, I believe it's the Mountain States Community College Association. It's a Association of Community Colleges, and he based a salary report for Mesa Lands based on documentation from that report and what he found would be useful for recruiting and retaining staff here at the college. And he moved forward with it, and the board supported him. I believe many here at the college, staff-wise and faculty-wise, supported those moves. Unfortunately, the information, financial information, the former president was relying on was not accurate. The monies that he was seeing in different various accounts held by the college were already allocated for different uses, could not be used to support the salary increases. And he did not know that. During that period of time, we noted that there was a number of people that were hired to fill the position of finance director that had been vacated by a long-time person holding that position. But they were unsuccessful in staying. And so there was no continuity of knowledge and experience there. And that impacted the ability of getting accurate information to the president and onto the board. We noted that during this time period, the board itself was presented on a fairly regular basis financial statements at your board meetings, the financials of the college saying, here's where we are. We looked at those. Unfortunately, most of them were woefully inaccurate. So even though those financial reports that were being presented to the board were not accurate. And therefore, you could not make accurate determinations and recommendations in supporting expenditures of the college. Next page, please. Let's go one more. There we go. So I talked about the staff increases. There's also 2 legislative approved pay increases. If you look at this graph here between fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2023, you can see in fiscal year 2022 these huge jumps in compensation. All this came together. There was a legislative mandated, there was a pay increase in fiscal year 2022 that came out, that was approved in January 2022 for that legislative session, came into effect in July of 2022. That was, I think it was a 1.5%. Later in 2022 is when the former president approved, the board's approval, moved forward with the compensation package for staff and faculty. That kicked in January of 2023. 2022, excuse me. So let me back up. It was January, July of 2021 when the 1.5 kicked in. 2022 is when the pay increase came in. Well, right after that, the legislature had another session, and they approved adding another 4% to that. It came into effect in April of 2022. Part of that was unfunded. So the college had to come up with that legislative mandated pay increase out of its already existing budget. It did not contemplate that. It was already strained by the compensation it just gave. So it had to do 4% on top of the increases they just gave. And then the legislature approved a 3% to take effect in July of 2022 for fiscal year 2023. So that was another 3% that was not contemplated for the college's budget for FY23. It's not included. So we have 7% there that was not contemplated for. A lot of that was not budgeted for. It did not include additional funds from the state of support on top of those pay increases that are already been given pretty much college-wide. So that put the college in a very difficult situation, and that just compounded with the fact that they were not recovering the funds that they were due. They were not collecting the funds for the federal reimbursements. You're showing on the books that you were owed money. It was not being shipped in the budget. It wasn't there because it wasn't being collected. So the next few pages, as we go on, going to be page 15 and 16. Next page. So this page and the next page, these are just by position during the period what the salaries were for the positions prior to the pay raises from the former president and after, and what the increases were. We have some increases that topped 50%. I think we had one increase, it was, I think the highest one we showed was 150% pay increase. I think everybody would love to have a pay raise that big. But in looking through the financials, it just was not sustainable. And that's where the college found itself. So as we go through the next few pages, that still talks about the pay increases and what that impact was to the college. If you move on a couple more pages, we get to number F. It's going to be a few more. Should be page section where we covered what I was just discussing. That's the financial reporting and communication with college leadership and trustees. Financial reporting was not being done. And we noted an unfortunate situation here at the college that we see throughout the state. And that's, we have staff that does not have the skills, knowledge, or experience to be performing the positions they find themselves in. It's not unique to the college. It's not unique to Clay County or Tucumcari. It's, frankly, we find it all over the state, big cities, rural areas, what have you. It's just a sign of the times right now is that we don't have the people in the workforce that have the financial and accounting experience and knowledge coming in and working these positions. And that is the struggle I think the college still works through, is finding those qualified individuals to fill those positions, because they are very critical. They're often overlooked, but as many of us know in here, especially if any of you are small business owners, you understand that financially, if you are not staying on top of it, you are insolvent, you're going out of business really quick. It's very similar, same thing can happen in government. So we talked about that in this section here for F, financial reporting. I think I've talked about that. If you go to the next page, one more. Let's go to G. We're going to talk about oversight agency and approvals to increase budget authority. We're going to talk about one of the findings in here, and we have a representative from the higher education department. The college is required to provide regular financial reports to their oversight agency, which is the higher education department. The higher education department relies on the college to provide accurate numbers, financials, so they can ensure that the funding that comes through higher education to the college is being used appropriately and being accounted for appropriately. The problem here is we found that the leadership of the college at the time was not creating accurate reports. So the reports going to higher education were just as inaccurate as the reports going to the Board of Trustees. Higher education couldn't see there was a problem here at Mesa-Land sooner because the information they were being given was inaccurate. So that compounded the problem and allowed this to fester, if you will, longer than it should have. The purpose of oversight is to provide that outside guidance to help catch these issues before they become problems. And this is a rare occurrence where that didn't happen. And it's because those reports were not being accurately put together. And it was done intentionally. So we talk about that in the report. Going to the next page, see H. We looked at conflicts of interest and nepotism. We had complaints about the concerns about the prior president hiring family members as faculty or staff here at the college. And we looked at that issue and found that while it was approved, it was still a violation of college policies and protocols at the time. Next page, please. We also looked at the college component unit determinations. Auditor Maestas mentioned this briefly, and I was just looking at the determination that the College Foundation is a component unit of the college. And how that was addressed, I've looked at, and it's now consistent with the other institutions of higher education in New Mexico where the foundations are component units of the institutions themselves for auditing purposes. There's another issue that came up, and that was annual leave and sick leave payouts. This is an issue that was brought to our attention in the latter part of our special audit. Previous administration, be it the lack of proper policies or rules, financial wherewithal to stay on top of things. We're paying out leave and compensation at rates greater than that could be actually accumulated, and in some cases at time and a half or more, which were totally unallowed. So there were several cases where retired employees collected a lot more money than they should have from the college on these payouts. And that was another factor added to the financial situation of the college. They're paying out more money than they're bringing in. Some of that shouldn't have happened. So that's talked about here. I think the biggest exception is that there was one former employee that was paid almost $63,000 more than they should have been. So, you add all that up, that's quite a bit of money for the college in a couple of years. Next page. So the next few pages, starting here, section K was an assessment of the overall financial health of the college, looking at the just their different net positions and where their assets were and their liabilities. And generally speaking, the college was an okay spot. It wasn't the greatest, excuse me, but they were much better off in looking at it from this perspective than what the financial records show. So this section of the report talks about what we found looking at the actual assets and liabilities, and why the college was actually in a better position than what everybody perceived at the time. So if you move on to L, here we have some other findings we're going to talk about, and we've talked about things that came up during our actual performance of the special audit. One of the things that came up was this EAB Navigate, the student engagement platform. It was brought to our attention. It was the former president proposed this. That it was going to be a cost-free endeavor for the college, so it was supported and moved on. Come to find out, it actually did cost the college quite a bit of money. That was not accounted for. There's a lot of information that's brought to our attention that was more anecdotal to the audit. A lot of it was perceptions of staff and faculty on how they perceived the former leadership and the former board, and either their lack of involvement or lack of engagement with staff. I can say that based on doing a comparison of how staff and faculty explain things, how they were compared to how they are now, at least based on those interviews, it's a 180-degree turnaround. So I think at least from the faculty and the staff that we interviewed and talked to about changes, that was very indicative that the college is on the right track moving forward. So if you go to the next page, this is the scope of work. So these bullet points are the areas that we focused on. This was included in the scope. This is what specifically we were looking at. And then there's a list of, on the next page, of some of the staff members that and leadership that we spoke with. And then there at the middle of the page, going on for the next 2.5 pages, are a list of corrective actions that the college has taken to date. And that was the date of this report. They've taken more since then. You guys have moved heaven and earth in moving forward. Looking at how things were during the time period to how things are now, it is a world of difference. This report is very, very brutal, but I do want to remind everyone that this report is a snapshot in time, and it's during that period. It's reflective of the past and not the present. And the purpose of that is to see where you findings that we're going to talk about now, they're very detailed. Instead of listing out dozens upon dozens of findings, which would have left us here all evening, we consolidated them, so they're very intense. And I'm not going to go into all the nuts and bolts of them, but I'm going to go through all 12 of those findings and discuss what we identified as the cause, and how they affected the college, and what the recommendations were from the audit standpoint, and what the college has stated their corrective action is going to be in the path they're moving forward with. So we're going to have to skip through a bit, because some of these, so we're going to actually skip through to page 67. So keep going. Yeah, it's 60, it's not 67 there, so it's 67 on the report, and that's not showing there, so yeah, keep going. Yeah, so that's 66, and then you got that, so you got 66 there. And then you have an attachment that's a number of pages, so you want to keep going until you see 67 at the bottom. So I think that's 20 or 30 pages right there that you're going to be scrolling through. And just for folks' knowledge, just the attachment that's being scrolled through now, that was the basis that the former president used to help come up with compensation guidelines that he recommended to the board for staff and faculty when he made those increases. Okay, so we'll stop there. So this is just a quick snapshot of all 12 finding titles. And we're going to go through them individually. But you can see in looking at them, they're pretty intense. There's a lot packed into them. So I'm going to do my best to unpack them. If there's any questions we're going through, we'll talk about those. Go ahead and scroll to the next page, please. So finding number 1 is state of New Mexico governmental conduct and anti-donation clause violations. So I'm looking through, as part of our examination, we found transactions involving public officials and employees that appear to advance personal and family benefits, violation of either the anti-donation clause or the Governmental Conduct Act. They included several instances where potential conflicts of interest that involve those excessive unused paid time off payouts that I mentioned earlier, the employment of family members that I mentioned earlier, and then there's 2 instances where we found that there was a company that was under contract with the college to complete construction work, and the owner of that company was simultaneously employed by the college at the time. There was another company, contract was executed with another company to complete HVAC work, and at the time, the owner of that company, their spouse was a high-level employee of the college. We could not find where either one of those conflicts were had been disclosed to the college before those contracts were approved, which should have been. So those in and of themselves could run those staff members or former staff members afoul of state law the Governmental Conduct Act and the Anti-Defamation Clause. The finding goes further through and talks about different statutes that were looked at that are involved in this. And the effect of all of these violations, in a nutshell, next page, going, is, oh, go back up, right there, is that taxpayer funds, either state, federal, or local, may not have been spent in the best interest of the college. That's the bottom line. Taxpayer funds are supposed to be expended for the express interest of the public entity in the best interest of that public entity. And the cause, we noted, is that the internal controls and applicable laws, the individuals doing this were able to bypass those. Those policies, those laws, those internal controls, they existed. They weren't being enforced. In several of these instances, we have what we call management override controls. The people who were making decisions knew about these rules and just avoided them by overriding them because they were in a position of authority. And those who had the ultimate oversight were not aware of this, so they could not exert their control. And I'm talking about the Board of Trustees saying, no, you cannot do that. Because ultimately, the expenditure of public funds for the betterment of a public institution falls with the governing body. Buck stops with you folks. I think you all know that. So that was not happening. It was being, those controls were being worked around, and that information was not getting to you, and that was being allowing these violations to occur. So we made several recommendations on how the college can proceed to correct that way and get back on the right track. And they're listed here, including the strengthening and review and strengthening of internal controls and policies. The board and the college has taken that to heart and has provided a very strong and response outlining the actions that the college has taken to date to move forward, and the progress speaks for itself. You guys have moved along and doing quite well. The next finding we found, number 2, was late and incomplete college and foundation audits. We spoke about the external audits for the annual audits for the college. Foundation is also behind on its audits, but is working diligently to get those caught up. The late audits on the part of the foundation does impact the college's audit. So once they get all caught up, I think you guys are going to be well on your way. We noticed one thing on the foundation side, there was coming from the late audits, is the Form 990s that the foundation files for the Internal Revenue Service. Many of those reflected the same dollar amount with very little or no change for a number of fiscal years. And that's a virtual impossibility. And the IRS could come down and audit and actually take action for improper filings. They deem that it's a violation of the Internal Revenue Code. So it's something we pointed out and in the finding, and we urge the college and foundation to correct moving forward. Because the last thing you want to do is have the tax man come because you filed your documents wrong. So we talked about again, what happened, the effect of the delayed audits. Many in the governing board, President Washington know this. There's been a executive order from the governor's office since 2013, which limited government agencies in acquiring or utilizing or accessing their capital So, again, working forward, the Office of the State Auditor is wrapping up the 2024 annual audit for the college. And it's my understanding that we intend to have the 2025 audit going in as long as there's no, biblical events or floods, we should have everything done and on time, to where your audits are back on time. And I know that the foundation is right there with us in getting all that information together and done. So I think we're going to be able to go past that one. So going on to the next finding, we're talking about negative cash flow. Cash flow for the college was impacted in a number of ways, and this is a very compact finding. We had inadequate funding and enrollment, so there wasn't enough student and enrollment income to help support the college operations based on the income that was going out. That includes the pay raises and things of that nature, and the other expenditures that I've talked about. The untimely request for reimbursement of federal and other funds, talked about that. That impacted the cash flows negatively. The legislative mandated and other raises, those raises negatively impacted because they were not budgeted and those fundings were not included. If they were unfunded mandates, like one of the raises was partially unfunded from the legislature, that impacted the college's cash flow. Budget overspending. Goes without saying that impacts. Fraudulent leave payouts, that impacted. The lease agreements that could not be justified and could almost be contemplated as being wasteful in one sense. Looking at it from the outside perspective on being able to justify what those expenditures were for, and then a lack of timely financial information. All that combined into this fund. And the effect of these financial management decisions is this college exhausted its available cash reserves. You guys did pretty much wipe those out. The resulting financial deterioration posed a risk to the college's accreditation. Its accreditation status threatens its capacity to sustain instructional programs and services, and then undermine the public confidence in the institution's ability to manage public funds responsibly. Again, we made some significant recommendations of what the college should do in order to move forward. And the college listed out the corrective action that they have taken to date moving forward. We brought in some really good folks that had some financial expertise to help right the ship. And so far you've been smooth, you've been sailing the crease, but there may have been some rough waters that you're doing much better. And this going through, I think this is going to bear out in the future audits when this is looked at, that you guys have made great progress and you're moving forward from there. Next finding is the lack of staffing, positions, levels, experience, and accountability. This was a finding that's a very difficult one to be able to address with an easy fix. We're in Tucumcari, New Mexico. It's eastern New Mexico. It's rural. Finding the applicant base in order to attract those applicants with the knowledge and experience to handle these financial jobs is difficult. And that may be an understatement. But you're not alone in that. Even at our level at the state auditor's office, we have difficulty recruiting and retaining staff that have the experience and expertise to do the jobs that we do. And that points to one of the things that the former president was trying to help rectify as well. It's an ongoing battle that the college is working on. We're making progress. We made recommendations here, but there again, I don't think I wish I could tell you there's a silver bullet for it, that I could just hand to you and say, here's how you fix it. I don't think there is. so when you have a long-time employee who has a wealth of knowledge in his or her possession, that knowledge doesn't just disappear. It's kept here within the college and shared, so you don't lose those critical, that critical information. That was a big impact on the college. When your former CFO left and took all that knowledge, it couldn't be replaced. It couldn't be replicated. I think you're still working to replace a lot of that. Next finding is number 5, and this one was directed towards the governing body. We noted that there was a lack of board training and an active finance committee, a lack of legal advice or having an attorney advise the board or the college, and there was a lack of full and transparent board oversight. In a nutshell, we noted that the board did not appear, and this is a review of board minutes, meeting minutes, board meeting videos, and other documents, and even interviews with board members themselves. The board wasn't always fully engaged in a way that the general public has an expectation of their elected leaders to be engaged. We found that there was many times deference to the senior board member, and often the president, that appeared to make all decisions of the board, and that impacted the board's function and its oversight responsibilities. And one of the things in recommending out of this, and I think there's even been a change in the state law. Wasn't there a change in the law, Mr. Robert?
Requires training, fiduciary training.
So there's a new law that now requires, the state now mandates a level of fiduciary training for elected board members to give you that knowledge to be able to perform in the position that you chose to run for and were elected for, so you have that understanding. We don't expect all of you to be accountants and auditors, and financial experts, bringing your unique backgrounds to positions that you're elected to. But it's our role as a state to make sure that you have that knowledge and understanding so you can interpret the documentation that in this case staff would provide to you, and you can independently judge its validity and does it make sense to you. Because, as I stated earlier, the buck stops with you. When all comes down to it, you answer the people, your constituents. The president answers to you. But your constituents are all out here. So that's the point behind this finding and why we got into the criteria on that. One thing on progress on that policy, that there was no finance committee. But the board had an existing policy, just wasn't enforced. The board has since enforced that, and you're staying much more engaged, and that's the best thing you can do for the college. If you're staying engaged, you're staying knowledgeable, and keeping up to date, and that's the best thing for the college, because you're right there with me. Okay, finding number 6. This is a finding on the deceptive financial reporting that negatively impacted New Mexico Higher Education Department's ability to provide effective oversight to the college. First glance, it sounds like higher education wasn't able to do its job, or wasn't doing its job. It's not that it wasn't doing its job; it couldn't do it effectively because the information that being provided was inaccurate. That has since changed. My understanding that since the implementation of the enhanced fiscal oversight, the college, that the financial reporting has been timely, it's been accurate, it's been reliable, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a finding that does go away. It does get resolved very quickly. previous attempts from prior presidents to assert that the foundation was going to enter the college in accordance with county governmental accounting standards. The foundation pushed back. And that goes to one primary former member of both the Board of Trustees and the foundation pushed back against that. The foundation has since corrected that and moving forward. But it did place at that, because of that unreported component unit and the fact that it wasn't being considered as part of the college and looked at financially as part of the college, the endowments that the college, the foundation held on behalf of the college were in danger, because those were public funds. They were not private funds. They were specifically endowed by the legislation to provide support to the college. So that has been corrected. We lay this all out, and I think a lot of it, that probably would have been fixed sooner, but there was a pretty steady turnover of, at least at the president level here at the college during that time. I think prior to the period we looked at, the longest tenured president was several years before the period. It's been a while. So with stability in the president's office, I think we're going to see a lot of this get corrected as well. And moving forward on it. So finding number 8. So employee and board turnover, lack of established practices for the identification, mitigation, monitoring of risk and financial health at the college. There's been a lot of turnover on the board. Looking at the records of the board during the period, there wasn't a large number of elections, but there was vacancies and there was appointments. So board members came in midstream, didn't always have the full picture. Sometimes you were, from what best we could tell, you were the ones who were willing to step up to fill vacancies and moving forward, and hadn't decided to run for election as you will, because you're in elected positions. I believe since then you've all have run for and stood for election and been elected to your positions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's to be the case now. But the college lacked practices and policies in order to identify and mitigate these risks to the financial health that I've been talking about. And that's laid out in this fund. A lot of it was due to employee turnover, board turnover. It just goes without saying, if you keep losing people in these positions, you have to keep trying to bring in new people and get them out up to speed, you're going to lose a lot. You're going to always be playing catch up. And that's exactly what the college found itself. These findings, by the way, are not intended to criticize. They're to identify what the conditions were, what were found, and recommendations on how to improve operations moving forward from these perspectives. So please don't take these as criticisms, because they are not. Noting the effect, of course, goes without saying that the lack of sufficient qualified personnel, and consistent board membership, and effective internal controls at the college did result in significant risks to the financial stability and operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The college staff was not producing accurate financials. Those financials, inaccurate financials were being reported to management and governance. You could not make accurate decisions, or your predecessors could not make accurate decisions based on the financials. And then those financials also being inaccurately reported to oversight for regulatory compliance, and their ability to oversee and regulate, if you will, was impacted because of those altered financials. Again, the college has made great strides. I think we've, goes without saying, and I'll hammer it time and time again, you guys have found within the community those folks who are willing should have been something that was brought to the attention of leadership and the board to be addressed in much more timely fashion. Unfortunately, at the time, the environment at the college did not support that type of fraud reporting, whistleblowing, if you will. The employees and the staff did not feel comfortable bringing their concerns to leadership, to the board. Matter of fact, we had many staff members tell us that they were specifically told on threat of losing their employment, or loss of employment, that they could not have any contact with board members. The recommendation would be that the college enable institute an internal audit, so you guys can have an internal person who goes in and looks at this from a programmatic standpoint and keep you more informed on what's going on independently and without taking sides. The other thing we recommended is furthering and identifying and using those fraud reporting mechanisms such as the Office of the State Auditor. We have a fraud reporting hotline. It's available, and we encourage folks to utilize that, to keep us apprised. And then we can move forward and work with agencies such as yourself on identifying and correcting those issues that are identified. So we talked about that in this funding. And the college is going to be looking at the potential of taking on that internal audit function. Of course, a lot of these things, if you're looking at a contractor or additional staff, is all budget driven. So it's looking at having the funding, having the capacity, having that, but the will is there. You're just lacking probably just a few more of the financial pieces. So number 10, which I think is the next page, unfinished and untimely account reconciliations and reports and lack of internal controls and compliance. A lot of these sound repetitive, in a sense they are, but they're all tied together. When accounts are not reconciled timely, or they're not reconciled at all, or only partially, you have no idea what your financial statement is. If your cash accounts are not reconciled with your bank statements, you have no idea how much money you have coming in, how much money you have going out. If you look at a bank statement, that's a snapshot 30 days ago. You don't know where you are right now. And that was the problem I think the college found itself in, because that just got compounded and compounded and compounded. You were never presented with bank statements as far as we could tell. The board was not, just the financials that were prepared by staff. And those were not reconciled. So they were just pulling numbers that just were not being updated. The internal controls to keep that in place, those were lacking. Those have been are being reinforced. We're seeing that. It goes down to segregation of duties, ensuring you have sufficient staff in the financial sector to ensure that those activities are, one, being performed by somebody who knows how to do that, and two, that they're being verified by somebody above that independently, be it a supervisor or another party. There's at least two people looking at that transaction or that reconciliation to make sure it's, one, it's done, and two, it's accurate. And then you can rely on that information to provide it to you. Moving on to number 11. Here we found incomplete written accounting internal control processes and procedures, including an accounting procedures manual, absent of workflow and project management software, or absence of workflow and project management software, and insufficient interdepartmental communications. So what is that? Well, at some point in time, the college did attempt to have some kind of policies and procedures in place when it came to finances and accounting. Just never got completed. one of the big things, and I haven't mentioned at this point, but this is probably a good point, is the college uses Gensabar for its accounting software. It's a very good program. It's used in a lot of agencies and entities utilize it. Problem is when the college implemented it, they did not fully implement it. And then they did not fully train staff. What we found is there was one staff member that we could identify that probably had the most competent knowledge of using the program, and they weren't in finance. The second most competent person took information from the system and then transferred it and created their own financial spreadsheets, which was duplicative work and could lead to additional errors. And when that person left, it resulted in staff remaining who had no idea how to access the finances and the financial reporting and use the financial system to track your receivables, your liabilities, and your expenditures. They couldn't do it. They couldn't pull accurate reports. They were piecemealing it together, and it was just providing inaccurate information. The college has used funding to fully implement that and to ensure training is there, so you're moving forward. And again, that's the best thing to do, because you need to be able to have anybody in a position of leadership be able to go and request and pull those reports and get accurate information anytime. And finally, the last finding. Last finding is procurement violations. There was a number of issues when it comes to procurement and the procurement code that the college is required to follow that we found defective. There was inconsistent oversight. There was inconsistent adherence to established policies. There was things being done with no established policies. Purchases were often made without following policies or having documentation in place. For example, making purchases without having the funds encumbered or a purchase order in place. We found issues with contract management, vendor engagement, requisition handling, purchases bypassing normal purchase orders, procedures altogether, Generally speaking, when we talk to folks involved in your procurement process during that period, the overall procurement environment was described as, quote, disorganized and lacking continuity, unquote. And that was particularly noticeable whenever there was changes in leadership or staffing. And as I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of different CFOs that came and went during the period we looked at. None of them for very long. I think it was your previous CFO, not your current one, but your one previously, that was here the longest out of the whole bunch. But for the past, during that entire period, that was by the former president, I think probably 80% of his time as president, he had no CFO. And he had nobody he could go to and rely on to provide him accurate financial data. So any financial information he was passing out to the board was inaccurate. And it just compounded itself. So we talked about that and the effects of what the procurement procedures and failing to follow procurement had on the school or on the college, to include the potential of criminal action, because the procurement code does carry criminal sanctions for violation of the procurement code. Made our recommendations again, and college, I am happy to say all of these, just like the previous 11, college is moving forward. You've listened to your external auditors, say, there is still more work to be done. There's always more work to be done. But you guys have done a great job. I think the community and the faculty and staff here at the college should commend you for the efforts you've made on their behalf. That is the presentation of this audit report. Are there any questions that I might be able to entertain from anyone? Any members of the board? Yes, sir.
I'm with the Eastern New Mexico News. This wasn't made clear in the special audit. Was the former president interviewed during the course of the special audit?
Was not.
Was not. Did he give a reason?
We were unable to contact him.
And I have a second question. Has the results of the special audit, were they forwarded to the Attorney General?
The results have not been forwarded to the Attorney General.
Will they?
Those that are actionable will be referred to the appropriate oversight agencies. It has been referred to the Higher Education Department, as they are the immediate oversight, so they can take appropriate actions from their perspective. Those violations of what we determine were violations of the law will be turned over as appropriate. I will note that some of the individuals that were noted on these possible violations, at least one is deceased, and others are no longer with the college. Any other questions from anyone in the audience? Yes, sir.
Could you simplify to me, because I heard it so fast. What is a compounding unit? What does that mean? The foundation is a compounding unit of the college. What is the meaning?
In a nutshell, and I don't have a specific definition off the top of my head, so forgive me. But generally speaking, under government auditing standards, they're financially tied to the main entity, in this case the college, that without the college, the foundation would not exist. The sole purpose of the foundation as a component in it is to support the college. Otherwise, it doesn't need to exist. It would not exist. So that's one of the criteria, that's the main criteria, is that in looking at a component, is it something that can stand alone? Would it survive on its own as an independent entity? And the answer is no, then they're going to be a component. The sole purpose for the foundation, their documents for existing is to support the college, and that's their sole reason. Yes, ma'am.
At the beginning of your report, as far as the foundation is concerned, you mentioned the federal grants and endowment funds with regards to drawdowns. Could you please clarify, because I have never heard that as far as the foundation is concerned. Only on the college side do they do drawdowns.
Well, that was a combined funding, so it covered everything. So when we're talking about the federal grants, that was on the college side, the endowments, the foundations.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Any other questions for Mr. Beck or Auditor Myasis? Thank you very much.
Mr.
Appreciate you.
Chairman, members of the board, thank you for your time. Mr. President, thank you for your time. Thank you.
I just want to thank the state auditor and AGD, Secretary Rodriguez, State Board of Finance, all of the Mesa Land staff and faculty announcements, our next meeting will be Tuesday, August 19th, at 3 o'clock, I believe. So now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Do you,
I move we adjourn.
you don't want to,
Oh, we,
action to accept.
I'm sorry, we got to accept it.
Oh,
So first, I'll entertain a motion to accept the special audit of Mexico State Audit.
I so move. We accept the special audit presentation.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Box?
Yes.
Mr. Sidwell?
Yes.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yes.
Mr. Primrose?
Yes.
Mr. Sandoval is not. Who seconded that?
I did.
Mr. Sidwell.
So now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.